1918, and the sands running out. By the end of May, nearly 250,000 Americans had landed in Europe. At Buckingham Palace, King George V reviewed the latest arrivals. Europe was experiencing its first great American invasion in history. Meanwhile, elsewhere in London, the British Minister of Information, Lord Beaverbrook, was inspecting another kind of force, a fleet of mobile cinema vans. For much of the war, propaganda had been largely overlooked as a means of advancing victory. But now the Allies were out to tell the neutrals whose sands were running out and whose star was in the ascendant. Neutrals such as Holland, where interned Allied soldiers and sailors whiled away the hours until the war might end and they could go home. And the story that Allied information could tell was one of solid, steady progress. If in mid-1918 you could have flown like the Allied airmen over the eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East, you would have seen from the skies the spectacle of the enemy falling back everywhere. In Mesopotamia and Palestine, the Australians, the New Zealanders, and the British were edging the Turks steadily backwards. Already Jerusalem had fallen to General Allenby's forces, and for the first time since the Crusades, the Holy City was again in Christian hands. And the city's fall was a good omen for the future. Everywhere, the Allied guns were speeding the Turkish army's retreat towards Home and Constantinople. And along the line, shattered Turkish trains were evidence of the activity of a mysterious Lawrence of Arabia. In the Balkans, too, the Allied war machine was in forward gear, forcing back the Austrians and Bulgarians in a series of defeats. For the Serbs and our other Eastern allies, it was the start of the long final march which was destined to end in the collapse of the military alliance known as the Central Powers. Meanwhile, in France, America's General Pershing was taking full advantage of Foch's permission to use his new reinforcements for himself. For by now, there were enough to go round. The summer of 18 saw such an influx that Allied shipping was hard-pressed to transport them all. And as for their equipment, well, this was one time when you can't take it with you. Didn't seem to apply.